Notes from a Bush Hideaway by Goldie Alexander, read by Kim Dodsworth. Water ship down. Last week I sighted a rabbit. Now, this may not seem important enough to warrant a report, except that a warning ran down my spine. A decade ago, we were overrun by bunnies that were immune to both calicivirus and myxomatosis. Every so often we'd glimpse a black rabbit. Local lore has it that these black bunnies are a throwback to a European ancestor, and that sighting one heralds a plague year. How true we found that to be. That year, our only growth area were rabbit-proof fences. This was because our bunnies bred according to Malthusian law, a law which argues that unrestrained reproduction of any species will result in geometrical doubling, tripling ad infinitum. Those hungry rabbits chomped through our veggie patch, dug into our flower beds, ravaged our lawns, ring-barked our fruit trees, excavated our driveways, and played chicken with our car. At dawn and dusk, hundreds of buck-toothed bunnies sat around munching and gas-bagging whilst depositing mounds of little black and brown droppings, which I suppose is the rabbit equivalent of dirty plates, used glasses, and overflowing ashtrays. In previous years, our local foxes had dined splendidly on le pain à la chasseur. Sometimes our foxes extended their menu to include bush rats, possums, echidnas, the odd chook, and any bird, bat, sugar glider, or flying fox silly enough to hang around after hours. However, in an effort to return this area to its original state, koalas and wombats were released into the bush. When the foxes took to kibitzing the koalas and worrying the wombats, they had to be destroyed. And with no natural predators to keep their numbers down, our rabbits bred. Well, they bred like rabbits. Only lack of food and bad weather reduced the population to a manageable status, and the rabbits on our block either drifted away or died of old age. But that rabbit I saw last week could herald another plague. Would someone please tell him or her that our village is no longer watership down, and that he's definitely unwelcome? Or find me an Australian Pied Piper to lure him away. Faithless friends. Because work takes us to the city, we're weekend bushies. While we're away, the trees, bushes and flowers on our block provide food and shelter for many animals and birds. Amongst our visitors and residents we count blackbirds, wattlebirds, mudlarks, rosellas, magpies, kookaburras, woolly wagtails, finches, crows, galahs, wood pigeons, yellow and blue-breasted wrens, honey-eaters, tawny frogmouth, and barn owls. Most birds keep their distance when we're around. We work on the principle of you mind your business and I'll mind mine. Except for the grey shrike thrushes, who actually seek out human company. No sooner do we drive up to the house and they see our shadows on the glass than there's tapping on our window, a piercing cry, and a small grey and brown bird hopping on the sill looking for food. Confused by the house having two doors, the thrushes believe there are many more humans than actually exist and race between balconies hoping for more. Though we know in theory that these birds shouldn't be fed, who can resist their plaintive requests? Besides, we rationalise that when we aren't there, the thrushes have to content themselves with whatever they can forage. Our most consistent visitor has been a female, the progenitor and matriarch of what turned out to be many, many generations of grey thrush. She's always assured us of a warm welcome, provided we handed out a decent supply of bacon rind and shredded cheese. As she grew older, she sent some of her sons to retrieve these scraps, though still keeping a watchful eye on both of them, and also the aggressively territorial wattlebirds. We were able to observe our matriarch teach her children how to command attention, how not to be frightened when we came close, and how to fly a convoluted and confusing path back to their nest. But alas, birds can be as fickle as humans. Not long ago, new neighbours took over an adjoining property. Permanent bushies with a weakness for grey shrike thrushes. Needless to say, we haven't sighted one since. Pining for pines. Our bush block is located in an area where winter bites with icy teeth and rainfall is high. To combat the worst of this climate, our early settlers planted stands of radiata pine. For many decades, these pines offered protection from the wind for their houses, their animals, and their apple and cherry orchards. Radiata pine grows quickly. It offers the extra reward for busy farmers that nothing, apart from those yellow mushrooms that only recently appeared in our markets, will grow anywhere near them. But in the 60s and 70s, radiata pine became unfashionable, not least because they often hid splendid views. What's more, these views were worth lots of money, so the pine stands suffered. What were proud bulwarks were now poisoned and ring-barked. No tree was safe, and what often made things worse was that the tree vandals remained anonymous. It just so happened that if you owned any radiata pine, then one day you noticed that your trees had holes drilled into their trunks, or were suffering from some undiagnosed disease, or had been ring-barked. Our bush block was surrounded by stands of radiata pine. We had no objection to these trees as they gave us total privacy. Even blackberry wouldn't grow under them. Besides, we enjoyed frying those yellow mushrooms in olive oil and butter and adding them to stews and omelettes. Best of all, our pines reminded me of the stories I was read as a child, where wolves and bears and witches roamed the forests of Europe. Nevertheless, our neighbours objected strongly to them. They argued that we were blocking their views and reducing the value of their properties. So we finally gave in to peer pressure and cut them all down. All 120 pines were dismembered and their trunks carried away. What brought this to mind is that these same pine trees have now been declared to be an important part of our local heritage. These days, radiata pine aficionados stand in front of any tree that looks as if someone wants to cut it down. How times can change. More complex than any African tribal village. Relationships in our coastal village are as complex as in any African village. You soon learn how to differentiate between permanent and weekender. Studying their houses will tell you lots. Old farmhouses with attached sheds surrounded by acreage are inhabited by families still involved with livestock. These local families are regarded as aristocracy and often sell their land for astronomical profits. The wood and fibro holiday shacks put up in the 60s are being torn down to make way for more comfortable dwellings. Some of these holiday houses are so luxurious, any casual reference to them as holiday shacks seems almost obscene. Somewhere between these are the young families and the new retirees who enjoy the peace and quiet of the bush and often pride themselves on creating botanic masterpieces. The bottom of the social pile are those families who invade the camping reserves to sleep, eat and quarrel in caravans and tents, regardless of weather. Local gossip will tell you why some houses are rarely occupied, who is the local potter, who runs a stall at the local markets. Gossip will tell you whose husband or wife has taken off for greener climes, who is letting their house, who just sold and made a squillion, and who can't sell. Store and post office are two sources of information, the fire station another. Because so much of this coastal village is in flux, newcomers are quickly absorbed. You soon learn how people are inextricably entwined through a system of friendship or barter. Sometimes they employ each other or simply rub shoulders as they pass each other on the road. There are mixed feelings about the vacationers. On the one hand, they bring money and employment. On the other, they drive too swiftly, making the roads a hazard, loiter on the beaches, and make a nuisance of themselves by smiling and waving too generously at passers-by and then expecting some response. Though all these groups and subgroups may be different, we all share the same fear, that the city's spreading suburbs will, like a giant web, one day envelop us.